The Arizona desert stretched endlessly under the burning afternoon sun. Golden sand and red rock merging into a shimmering horizon at the research facility nestled between two massive rock formations. Dr. Marcus Hayes stood at the edge of the observation deck. Studying the weather monitors with mild interest, he was a tall man with gray streaking through his dark hair. Someone who had spent 30 years studying atmospheric phenomena and cosmic events without ever expecting to witness anything truly extraordinary. That ordinary Tuesday morning changed everything. Alarm came first. A high-pitched wail that cut through the facility's routine operations. Like a knife through silk, Marcus rushed to the monitoring station where his team had already gathered. Their faces frozen in expressions of confusion and dawning concern on the screens. Instruments tracked something massive descending through the upper atmosphere, not a meteor. Marcus thought immediately. The trajectory was all wrong. The object moved with purpose, burning through the sky in a controlled descent rather than the chaotic tumble of a space rock. Nicole Brooks, the facility's chief engineer, appeared at his shoulder, her dark eyes fixed on the readouts. "Those readings are impossible," she whispered, her voice tight with tension. "The object is too large, too uniform in shape. And that heat signature doesn't match any natural phenomenon." The descent slowed as the object neared the ground. Some kind of braking system activating with a sound like thunder rolling across mountains. Then impact the entire facility shook, sending coffee cups and papers tumbling from desks outside. A column of dust rose into the sky, obscuring whatever had fallen just 5 kilometers away for a moment. Everyone held their breath, then Marcus moved, his decades of training overriding any hesitation. "Get me teams ready," he commanded. Already moving toward the equipment lockers, environmental suits, basic instruments, and medical backup. "We need to assess the impact zone." Within the hour, Marcus and Nicole approached the landing site with 3 other team members. Their protective suits pale against the reddish sand. What they found stopped them. Cold rising from the desert floor was a structure so massive and so obviously artificial that it seemed impossible. The hole stretched at least 500 feet across, its surface a dull gray metal covered in strange patterns that might have been writing or design elements. Sections of it still glowed with residual heat, and one entire section was caved inward, exposing something that might have been internal mechanisms or cargo. Nicole moved closer, her suit's sensors broadcasting readings to the facility. "It's definitely a vessel," she said, her voice trembling with awe. "Look at the whole composition, the geometric sections, the propulsion systems along the aft section. This is a spacecraft, an actual spacecraft." Marcus ran his hand across the nearest section of hull, feeling the cold metal beneath his gloved fingers. The vessel was damaged. Clearly had been through something catastrophic. Burn marks scarred the exterior, and entire sections were twisted or bent, as if from tremendous impact forces. As the afternoon wore on and more teams arrived, a picture began to emerge. The ship was old. Incredibly old, judging by the degradation and corrosion patterns. Its systems appeared entirely offline, silent and dormant. But the real shock came when the first team managed to access an internal compartment inside, preserved by the vessel's sealed environment, was technology devices whose purposes were unknown, storage units that might contain data, and most incredibly, a chamber with walls covered in what appeared to be writing in an alien script. Captain Derek Silva arrived by evening, a military liaison with hard eyes and a harder jaw. He secured the perimeter with armed personnel and began documenting everything with methodical precision. "This changes everything," he said to Marcus as they stood looking at the massive vessel in the fading desert light. "If this is real, if this is confirmed to be extraterrestrial technology, the world needs to know, but we need to understand what we're dealing with first." Marcus nodded slowly. the implications were staggering. Humanity was no longer alone in the universe. More than that, they had stumbled upon evidence of a civilization advanced enough to build spacecraft. But there was more to consider. Where did this ship come from? Why had it crashed? Were there survivors? As night fell, the facility became a hive of activity. Scientists and military personnel worked around the clock, carefully documenting every detail of the vessel. They took samples, measurements, and photographs. They attempted to access the ship's systems. Though nothing responded to their efforts by dawn, Marcus stood again at the edge of the observation deck. But this time, he looked out at the massive silhouette of the alien spacecraft dominating the desert landscape. Nicole joined him with 2 cups of coffee. Handing him one, "I've been studying the damage patterns," she said quietly. "The main reactor section was deliberately shut down, and I think the crew initiated a controlled crash landing. They didn't want this ship to be found. But they crashed anyway, which means something went very wrong." "How wrong?" Marcus asked. "Catastrophically wrong," Nicole replied, looking at the system failures. The structural damage to critical sections, the depleted power reserves, whatever happened to this ship. Its original crew abandoned it. Over the next few days, the facility transformed into a research center unlike anything most of the team had ever experienced. Scientists from universities across the country arrived, along with government officials, military strategists, and international representatives. The alien vessel became the focal point of human scientific inquiry, a window into a universe far more complex and advanced than anyone had imagined. Then came the discovery that would change everything. A team working in a partially intact section of the bridge found something remarkable: a database, somehow partially preserved despite the ship's dormancy. With painstaking care, they began to extract information from it. Fragments of data emerged, pieces of a puzzle that revealed the ship's history. It had belonged to a species called the Valorians, an advanced civilization that had conquered much of their region of space. The ship itself was a military vessel, a warship designed for conquest and defense. But something had caused catastrophic system failures, and the crew had made the decision to crash and abandon it rather than allow it to fall into enemy hands. At least, that was what the fragmented record suggested. By the end of the week, Dr. Marcus Hayes stood in the command center of the research facility, surrounded by scientists and military personnel, staring at the slowly rebuilding picture of the Valorian technology. The implications were both magnificent and terrifying. Humanity possessed technology thousands of years beyond their current understanding. They had blueprints, partially, for systems that could revolutionize everything, but they also now possessed something else, something that might make them a target for whatever civilization had originally owned this vessel. When the first international communication arrived, explaining that the discovery could not remain secret, that other nations had already detected the landing, Marcus realized the world had irrevocably changed. The age of isolation had ended. Earth's true place in the universe was about to become clear. 3 months had passed since the discovery, and the research facility had transformed into something resembling a small city. Scientists from 43 countries worked in shifts around the clock, each bringing their own expertise to the monumental task of understanding the alien technology. The Valorian spacecraft, as it became known in official documents, now dominated the landscape. With its massive presence, Marcus spent most of his time in the Data Analysis Center, working with Dr. Lisa Chang, a quantum physicist who had become indispensable to decoding the alien database. Their breakthrough came on a Tuesday morning. Much like the morning when the ship had first fallen, Lisa burst into Marcus's office with a printout of translated Valorian text, her hands shaking with excitement. "We have enough of the database reconstructed," she announced, her voice breathless. "We know who owned this ship. The Valorians, according to the translated records, were an aggressive species of conquerors who had dominated their region of space for nearly 1,000 years. They operated under a principle of expansion and conquest, absorbing other civilizations into their empire or destroying them entirely. This particular ship, identified as a heavy assault vessel, had been one of their most advanced military platforms, but something had gone catastrophically wrong during a mission into unexplored space. The translated logs told a story of system failures cascading through the vessel, knocking out reactor containment, weapon systems, life support, and communications in rapid succession, rather than allow the ship and its technology to fall into the hands of unknown enemies in this unknown region. The captain had made a choice-controlled crash landing onto the nearest habitable planet, and complete systems shut down. The crew had ejected in small escape pods, heading toward the brightest star they detected, hoping to reach inhabited space and get rescued. They never knew they would crash on a world that would eventually develop its own spacefaring civilization. Meanwhile, Nicole Brooks was having her own breakthrough working with Kevin Ortiz, a brilliant but unconventional weapons engineer. She had been studying the ship's defensive and offensive systems. What she discovered was both wondrous and terrifying. The main weapon was a particle accelerator cannon, capable of generating focused beams of tremendous destructive power. But the propulsion system was equally remarkable. Drawing power from a quantum reactor that could theoretically operate indefinitely with proper maintenance. The shields, while now dormant, were theoretical constructs that Nicole's team could barely comprehend. Yet they had records of how the shields functioned. Fragmented though that knowledge might be, this ship is a superweapon, Kevin said one evening as he stood in the command center with Nicole and Marcus. Not by accident, but by design. Every system is optimized for destruction and survival. If we could reactivate it, if we could understand it well enough to operate it, we would possess something that could change the balance of power on Earth forever. That's precisely why we're not going to do that, Colonel Brian Hayes said firmly. The colonel had arrived 2 months earlier. Derek Silva's superior officer, a hard-faced man in his 60s, with the bearing of someone who had seen too much conflict. This is now under international military control. Our job is to study it, understand it, and secure it, not to weaponize it. But intelligence reports began arriving that complicated the colonel's position. Signals detected in deep space suggested that other Valorian ships might be searching for this vessel. The database contained enough information to transmit a distress signal across interstellar distances. If someone was listening, if someone was looking for this lost warship, they would eventually find it, and they would be extremely interested in what had happened to their technology. Then came the night when everything changed. Marcus was reviewing communications from international governments when Derek Silva entered with urgent news. Intelligence had confirmed Valorian ship signatures in the outer solar system. Not just one, but multiple vessels, apparently searching the solar system methodically. Their trajectory suggested they would reach Earth in approximately 8 months. 8 months to figure out how to defend the planet from technology that made human weapons look like primitive clubs. The meeting that followed included representatives from every major world, power soldiers and scientists, politicians and generals, all gathered in a secure underground facility built around the alien ship. The proposal that emerged was radical and controversial. Rather than hiding the vessel, they would attempt to reverse engineer it, not to create exact copies, but to adapt its principles to human engineering. They would create something hybrid, something that combined human ingenuity with alien technology, something that might stand against the Valorian fleet. Kevin Ortiz, when given the proposal, laughed. "You're asking us to do the impossible," he said. To understand technology we barely comprehend and modify it using systems that are thousands of years less advanced. Can you do it? Marcus asked directly. Kevin looked at the alien ship through the viewport. Its great hull gleaming in the artificial light, maybe. He answered, if we're willing to take risks that would make any normal engineer's hair turn white if we have enough time and enough resources, and if we get lucky, how much time do we need? General Carter asked, the newly appointed global military commander, to create a functioning weapon system. Something that might actually hurt a Valorian ship. Kevin calculated silently, his mind working through engineering, challenges and theoretical problems. 4 months minimum. He finally said, that gives us 4 months before they arrive. The decision was made. Humanity would weaponize the alien ship. It would use every resource at its disposal, call in every expert who might help. An attempt to transform a dead alien warship into Earth's only hope of survival. As Marcus left the command center that night, he found Nicole standing alone, looking up at the Valorian vessel. Are we doing the right thing? She asked quietly. Marcus did not have a good answer, but he knew they were committed now. Earth's future depended on their success. The race against time had begun. The underground facility had become something between a research center and a war room. Entire sections had been carved into the bedrock beneath the Arizona desert, and the Valorian ship now rested within a massive cavern, lit by thousands of work lights and surrounded by scaffolding and equipment. Marcus found himself working 18-hour days, barely sleeping, surviving on coffee and determination. But he was not alone. Nicole had transformed into a person, barely recognizable from the engineer of 3 months prior. Her hair was always pulled back, her clothes perpetually stained with grease and dust, but her eyes burned with brilliant intensity. Kevin Ortiz lived in the facility now, rarely leaving the command center where he worked on weapon systems integration. Even Jake Morrison, a local mechanic who had stumbled onto the project early and become invaluable through sheer practical genius, had become a permanent fixture. Jake was an unconventional addition to a team of world-class scientists and engineers, but his ability to solve problems using mechanical principles and practical thinking had saved the project countless times. The first major breakthrough came when Lisa Chang made a startling discovery in the quantum reactor chamber. The reactor, though dormant, was not permanently dead. With the right input of power and the correct harmonic frequency, it could be reawakened. The challenge was creating that frequency and providing initial power without causing a catastrophic reaction. We need someone insane or brilliant enough to try this, Lisa said in the conference room. Displaying her calculations, Nicole stepped forward immediately. I can design a test protocol, she said. We start small, measure everything, be ready to emergency shutdown if anything goes wrong. What followed was the most tense 48 hours of the project. Engineers rigged a controlled nuclear power supply to interface with the alien reactor. Lisa spent every minute refining the harmonic frequency, making minute adjustments based on the reactor's subtle electromagnetic responses, and Marcus stood in the observation booth, watching as Nicole directed technicians through the most delicate engineering work ever attempted on Earth. When the reactor began to glow with soft blue light, actually producing stable power output for the first time in thousands of years, the control room erupted in cheers. But the celebration was brief. Reactivating the reactor was only the first step. The real challenge was understanding and improving the alien systems that would use that power. Nicole focused on the shield generators, systems that created protective barriers around the ship's hull. According to the Valorian records, these shields could deflect energy weapons and mitigate kinetic impacts, but they were energy-intensive and fragile, using principles of physics that pushed against human understanding. We can't rebuild them exactly as they were. Dr. Sophie Richards, the material scientist, explained during one of their strategy meetings. Sophie was a quiet woman in her 50s who had arrived 4 weeks into the project and immediately identified herself as essential, but we can reinforce the principles they use with materials that shouldn't exist yet, but that we can synthesize in the lab for 3 weeks. Sophie's team worked in their materials laboratory, creating composite substances that incorporated elements of Valorian design principles with human manufacturing techniques. The results were promising, not perfect, but significantly more robust than the original alien structures. Kevin worked separately on the particle accelerator cannon. This was perhaps the most dangerous work of all. The weapon had nearly destroyed itself during the Valorian ship's final moments, and large sections were damaged beyond repair. But Kevin had an idea, an unconventional idea that his colleagues thought bordered on madness. What if we don't try to fix it? He proposed, what if we combine 3 of the damaged systems into a hybrid configuration? That's never been done with alien technology. Lisa protested. It's never even been theorized. Exactly. Kevin grinned. So nobody will be expecting it to work, which means we can innovate without the burden of knowing what's theoretically impossible. Jake provided crucial input on the mechanical aspects, where engineers struggled with abstract engineering challenges. Jake would step in and suggest practical mechanical solutions that somehow worked. When the first integrated weapon test was scheduled, the entire facility seemed to hold its breath. All non-essential personnel were evacuated from the area. The weapon was aimed at a mountain range more than 100 kilometers distant. Marcus watched from the control center as Nicole input the firing sequence. The Valorian ship's main reactor surged with power. The particle accelerator cannon, now partially rebuilt and completely remade through human-alien hybrid engineering, hummed to life on the distant monitors. The mountain appeared peaceful, untouched by any conflict. Then the energy beam fired. For just a moment, nothing seemed to happen. Then the entire peak of the mountain simply ceased to exist. Not damaged, not cracked, not burned, completely vaporized, leaving only empty air where a mountain had stood moments before. The silence in the control room was absolute. It works, Nicole whispered. Dear God, it actually works. Kevin was already running calculations, his mind moving toward the next phase. With that power output, we can theoretically destroy an entire spacecraft with a single strike, but the recharge time is the problem. We're looking at roughly 30 minutes between shots with the current reactor capacity. That might be enough, Marcus said slowly. If we can position the ship correctly, time our strikes well, use the shields to buy us time over the following weeks. The team made improvement after improvement. Nicole optimized the shields, making them stronger and more efficient. Sophie's composite materials were integrated throughout the ship's critical systems. Kevin refined the targeting systems, incorporating human military precision with alien weapon power. Lisa worked to develop computer systems that could interface Valorian technology with human controls. And Practical Jake, created maintenance protocols and emergency procedures for situations none of them could fully anticipate. The Valorian ship, once an abandoned relic of an alien civilization, was transforming into something new, something that had never existed before, a fusion of 2 species engineering traditions, representing the ingenuity and desperation of humanity faced with extinction. By the end of the 3-month development period, the hybrid weapon was ready, not perfect, filled with improvised solutions and unconventional engineering, but operational and deadly. When Marcus received the final status report and looked through the transparent aluminum viewport at the alien ship, now bristling with human modifications and retrofitted systems, he felt something shift within him. Fear, certainly, but also hope. Humanity was no longer facing an unknown future as a helpless prey species. They Had teeth now, whether those teeth would be enough against the Valorian fleet, nobody could say, but they would face the coming danger as more than victims. They would face it as survivors who had learned to use the tools of the gods themselves. 9 months after the ship had fallen from the sky, the world was a different place. The secret could not be kept any longer. Governments had begun preparing their populations for the truth about the Valorian vessel, and the threat it represented. News spread across every continent, and with it came panic, wonder, and a strange new sense of global unity. For the first time in human history, every nation on Earth faced a common enemy, an external threat that transcended politics, religion, and ideology. The facility in Arizona had been expanded further, becoming a complex of interconnected underground chambers that housed thousands of personnel. Scientists, soldiers, engineers, and support staff worked in coordinated harmony, each contributing to the singular goal of preparing Earth's superweapon for combat. Nicole Brooks had taken command of the physical systems integration team. She spent her days moving through the Valorian ship, inspecting every retrofit, testing every improvised connection, making certain that every redundancy was in place. The ship would need to function flawlessly when battle came, because there would be no second chance if the weapon failed during the first engagement. All was lost. Marcus worked in coordination with the military command structure, specifically with General Robert Carter and Commander Yuki Tanaka, the Japanese Strategic Operations Director. Together, they designed contingency plans for scenarios they devised and then hoped would never occur. What if the shields failed? What if the reactor overloaded? What if the Valorians used tactics nobody had anticipated? For each scenario, they created backup plans and secondary plans for the backup plans. Kevin Ortiz pushed the weapon systems to their absolute limits during testing cycles. He modified firing protocols, refined targeting algorithms, and integrated human military precision with the particle cannon's raw power. Sophie Richards worked with materials teams to develop emergency repair procedures if battle damage occurred. The ship needed to be able to patch itself with materials that could be quickly synthesized and installed, but the most important work might have been done by Jake Morrison, now holding the unofficial title of Chief Technical Officer. Jake had developed something revolutionary: emergency bypass protocols, ways for the ship's systems to continue functioning even when major sections were damaged or offline. His practical mechanical genius transformed complex alien engineering into simple conceptual framework. Systems could be rerouted, power could be redirected, failures could be compensated for with elegant mechanical solutions. When the Valorian ships were first detected entering the outer solar system, moving at tremendous velocity toward Earth, the facility transformed into a state of focused urgency. The initial contact came through radio signals, broadcasts transmitted on multiple frequencies, demanding Earth's unconditional surrender. President Lyndon Morrison, the United States President and head of the newly formed United Earth Government, prepared a response. She stood before the cameras with Marcus, Nicole, and Kevin at her sides. "We represent humanity," she said, her voice steady despite the tremor of fear running through every nation. "We will not surrender our world to conquest or enslavement. We will defend ourselves with every resource available to us." The Valorian response came within hours, a transmission that conveyed contempt and amusement. Humanity was beneath their notice, but they would erase it from the planet. Nonetheless, General Carter made the decision to move the ship to a hidden location, the Pacific Ocean, within a mountain range beneath the waves, where geothermal energy sources could provide continuous power. Nicole personally oversaw the transport operation, a delicate process that took 3 weeks and tested every nerve in her body. Moving a 500-foot Alien warship without damaging. It was a challenge that seemed impossible. Until it was done, the new location had advantages. The ship could draw power from the planet's own thermal energy. The mountain range provided protection from detection, and if the weapon needed to be fired, the Pacific Ocean provided a clear line of sight to approaching enemies. Kevin prepared firing solutions for every possible approach vector. The Valorian fleet would not arrive with unified formation or predictable tactics, but Kevin had calculated probabilities for the most likely scenarios. Each possibility had a targeting solution ready. Lisa Chang worked with military communications personnel to prepare Earth's final defense. Network satellites would feed targeting information to the command center. A global network of radars and sensors would provide warning of any Valorian attack from a command bunker buried deep beneath the Arctic ice. Commander Yuki Tanaka would coordinate the entire defense. Marcus spent the final weeks meeting with the team members who would actually operate the Superweapon in combat. They were the finest people Earth could produce, scientists and soldiers who understood both the theory and practice of warfare. They would sit in the command center as the alien fleet approached, and they would decide when to fire, how to fire, and whether humanity would live or die. The night before the Valorian fleet reached weapons range, Marcus found himself standing with Nicole in the ship's central chamber. The massive space was silent now. All systems warmed up and ready. The reactor glowed softly with contained power. The shield's generators hummed at low levels, prepared to spring into full defensive coverage at a moment's notice. The particle cannon pointed toward the sky, aimed at coordinates that would be updated constantly as the enemy approached. "Are we ready?" Nicole asked. Though they both knew the answer, they would never be truly ready for this. How could anyone prepare for humanity's first contact with an alien civilization to be warfare? As ready as we'll ever be. Marcus replied the final analysis had been completed. The Superweapon could function, it could fire, it could potentially destroy Valorian ships, but could it win against an entire fleet? Could human innovation and desperate engineering defeat the technology of a civilization that had conquered stars? Neither of them could answer that question by morning. The Valorian fleet would enter Earth's detection range by evening. They would be close enough to attack, and somewhere over the Pacific Ocean, a hybrid weapon built from alien technology and human ingenuity would fire its first shots in defense of a world that had unknowingly been at war since the moment an alien ship fell from the sky. The command center was a cathedral of screens and data. Monitors displaying every piece of information Earth's network of sensors could gather. Marcus sat in the central position, flanked by Nicole and Kevin on his left and right. General Carter stood at the communication station, prepared to relay orders to military installations across the globe. Lisa Chang monitored the ship's internal systems, ready to redirect power or isolate damaged sections. Sophie Richards stood by with emergency procedures if anything went catastrophically wrong, and Jake Morrison, the practical mechanic who had become irreplaceable, monitored the mechanical systems and redundancy protocols all around them. The Valorian ship hummed with readiness. The massive particle cannon was powered and aimed. The shield's generators waited for activation command. The hybrid reactor pulsed with controlled energy on the main screen. The approaching Valorian fleet resolved into visible shapes. 5 massive warships, sleek and deadly. Their hulls marked with signs of the countless battles they had fought as they decelerated into Earth orbital space. A transmission came through the Valorian commander's voice, translated through human language algorithms, carried contempt in every syllable. "This is Commander Vex of the Valorian Empire. You possess one of our vessels. You will surrender it immediately or face annihilation. You have 1 hour to comply before we begin bombardment of your world." President Morrison's Response had been recorded earlier and was now transmitted simple and direct. Earth will not surrender. We will defend what is ours. The Valorians responded with laughter. Actually genuine amusement at what they clearly saw as foolish defiance from a primitive species. Then, the attack began. The first energy weapons fired from the Valorian ships. Brilliant bolts of energy cutting through space at incredible velocity. For a moment, Marcus's heart stopped. Then the shields activated. Nicole's reinforced defensive systems blazed into life, creating barriers that caught the incoming energy and dispersed it. The Valorian weapons slammed against the shields and dissipated harmlessly. "That's one," Marcus whispered the Valorians, apparently expecting human technology to crumble. Paused for a moment, then they fired again, this time coordinating their attacks. 4 ships focusing fire on a single point of the shields. The reinforced barriers flickered, but held. More importantly, they were buying time. "Targeting solutions ready," Kevin announced, his voice focused and calm. All 5 ships identified and locked. "Fire!" Marcus commanded. The particle cannon discharged with a surge of power so tremendous it caused the lights to dim momentarily. The concentrated beam of energy raced through space on the main screen. One of the Valorian warships simply ceased to exist, vaporized, destroyed completely. Its crew and weapons obliterated in an instant, for the first time since contact. The Valorians fell silent. Then 2 of their remaining 4 ships immediately changed course, attempting to flee, but the other 2 pressed forward, raining fire on the hybrid vessel with renewed intensity. The shields blazed under the assault, and Nicole was already working calculations. Reactor strain increasing, Lisa warned from her station. The power demand is exceeding optimal parameters. How long until recharge? Marcus asked Kevin. 28 minutes, Kevin replied. But they won't wait that long. The commander of the remaining attacking Valorian ships seemed to realize the same thing. The assault intensified. Concentrated fire hammering against the shields. One section flickered and dimmed. Nicole immediately activated redundancy systems, rerouting power from non-critical systems. "We can hold," she said, though her voice betrayed uncertainty. Then one of the Valorian ships changed tactics. It broke from the attack pattern and began moving toward the planet's surface. Marcus realized immediately what was happening. The aliens were going to attack Earth directly, to bombard cities and kill millions. The move was designed to force humanity to abandon the superweapon and attempt to defend the planet with conventional military forces. But Jake had anticipated this kind of desperation. "I can reroute secondary reactor power to the cannon," he said quietly, already moving to implement the changes. "It will create cascade instability in the main systems. But we'll have one more shot. That's an emergency-only option." Sophie protested. "I know," Jake replied. "We're out of normal options." Marcus made the decision. "Do it." The power drain from the hybrid reactor was enormous, and dangerous systems across the ship began shutting down. Non-critical systems going dark to feed power to the one weapon that mattered. The main cannon powered up faster than it had been designed. To Kevin locked onto the descending Valorian ship, but Marcus stopped him. "Not the descending ship," Marcus said. "The command ship, the one directing the attack." Kevin understood immediately. Take out the leadership and the fleet would lose coordination. The command ship was farther away. Would be harder to hit precisely, but if they succeeded, the remaining attacking vessel was bombarding with renewed intensity. The shields taking tremendous damage. Elisa reported critical overload conditions across multiple systems. Nicole was already implementing emergency repairs. But they were fighting a losing battle. Marcus watched the weapons console as Kevin made his targeting calculations. The missile lock came up. The moment stretched like an eternity. Then Kevin fired. The second particle beam lanced out across space, this time There was no immediate result. The beam hit the Valorian command ship. But the damage was not total, but it was catastrophic. The massive warship convulsed, its propulsion systems damaged, its weapons arrays disabled. Remaining attacking ships suddenly realized the hopelessness of its position, with its command destroyed and the superweapons still functioning. Victory was impossible. It broke off its assault and accelerated toward the orbit of the second fleeing ship. The three remaining Valorian vessels formed a loose formation and began a rapid retreat, their engines burning as they accelerated away from the solar system on the main screen. Marcus watched them recede into deep space. For a moment, nobody in the command center moved. Then Nicole started laughing. A sound of pure relief. Lisa pumped her fist in the air. Sophie put her head in her hands, tears streaming down her face. General Carter stood motionless, processing what had just happened. Jake grinned, a simple expression of satisfaction at a job completed. Kevin was already reviewing the firing data, his engineer's mind already working on how to make the process more efficient. Marcus stood and looked at his team. These people, this collection of scientists and engineers and soldiers, had just saved the world. Humanity had faced an advanced alien civilization, and won not through superior numbers or resources, but through innovation, desperation, and the determination to survive. Over the following hours, messages came pouring in from governments and organizations around the Valence. The messages came pouring in from governments and organizations around the world. Celebrations erupted in cities across the planet. Humanity had proven itself capable of defending its home. But as Marcus stood with Nicole on an observation platform within the ship, looking out at Earth, he knew this was just the beginning. Valorians would recover. They would send more ships eventually, but now humanity knew what they were capable of. They had forged a weapon by combining their ingenuity with stolen technology. They had adapted and overcome, and they had proven that a young species, barely reaching into space, could stand against the empires of the stars. Nicole placed her hand on his shoulder. "What do we do now?" she asked. Marcus looked at the distant Earth, seeing his home world in a new light, a world that was no longer isolated, a world that had to prepare for a future filled with conflict and discovery. "Now," he said slowly, "now, we prepare for whatever comes next." The superweapon stood ready, a hybrid of two civilizations, a monument to human will and ingenuity above them. The stars awaited, and humanity was finally ready to meet them.